Malkin from Variety. How are you? How awesome is this movie? So awesome that we have two very special men here tonight, Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hey there.
How are you?
Very good after that.
I'm so excited. I mean, I understand why there had to be a strike. I'm really excited the strike is over. It's so awesome. You know, last time I saw Mr. Mescal, where was it? Oh, the Oscar.
Yeah. Interviewing me and my mom, yeah.
Yes. His mom's a great interview, by the way. Absolutely beautiful film. Watching it for the second time, it hit me a lot different. Obviously knowing how it ends, so I was looking for clues and hints and Easter eggs of sorts within that, so we'll get to that. But Andrew, I want to talk to you about the first time you read the script. Did Andrew Haig tell you what the story was, or were you reading it not knowing that in the end it was a ghost story?
Oh, I didn't know. No, he like all good storytellers, he didn't give away the end. No, I read it and I was immediately just. I thought it's sort of unlike any other script, and I think any other film actually. It's very difficult to describe it. I think the genre of it, because it's such a love story, but it's got so many different sort of elements and tones in it. And so when I first read it, I guess I was just a feeling that you get when you're an actor, and you just feel like. I was talking to Jeffrey Wright yesterday, amazing actor.
As one does.
Yeah. April. And he was talking about American fiction movies just made, and he said that when he read the script, he just felt like he could play that music, and I felt like exactly that. I thought it was such a beautiful way of putting it.
And Paul, what about you? When you read the script, do you have any idea what it was about, or you just went into it?
I didn't see the end coming. I wasn't aware of that when I went into reading it. I was acutely aware of Andrew Haig's previous work, and I knew that Andrew Scott was attached. So it was a no-brainer on that front. But yeah, I just immediately felt, in a similar capacity to what Andrew said, was like I felt like I knew what Harry's texture was. He felt close enough to me that I felt like I could relate, but far enough away that felt like it could be a challenge as well. And was it's one of those that I was just incredibly grateful that it came my way, and I'm so utterly proud of the finished product as well. And to have worked with this gentleman is one of the greatest honors of my career, to be totally honest.
Had the two of you met before at all? Do you know each other before filming?
We did, yeah. We did a little sketch for Comic Relief in during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we met under very strange.
Sketch for us?
Do you want us to do it now? Right now?
Can you imagine?
We haven't worked in a while. Yeah, so we did know each other, but not well. I think we're both. We know each other very well now. But I think we're both pleased that we knew each other, but easy choice. So I think we're pleased that we knew each other enough to feel comfortable, but not, it could still be a sort of free.
Did you have to do a chemistry read?
No, we didn't do it.
We didn't need chemistry.
No.
Big story of comic relief.
Yeah, exactly.
It did have chemistry. What was it, the first air and stuff, what was that day like for the two of you?
Well, I don't know if many of you know this, but the films, the scenes set in Adam's childhood home are in fact Andrew Haig's, our director's childhood home. So it's
Perfect
really
response.
It's just, it adds such an extraordinary sort of authenticity to it. I don't know, just what you bring to it. I felt like it was so generous of Andrew to do that. And I was nervous as you were when you start any job. But there was something I felt like that I knew that. Oh wow! I suppose because I've been really lucky to play lots of different kind of parts and parts that are sort of far away from myself, and lots of different kind of things. But as soon as I read that part and speaking to Andrew, he's such a generous, sort of soulful person, and the fact that he was so vulnerable enough to do that and invite people into literally the chambers of your home and your
But
heart.
other people live there now.
Well, they didn't. They were allowed to move out while we were.
It's not like your mom and dad were there, it's like, yeah, right.
Some people, yeah. So no, they brought it back to the way it might have been in the late '80s. So I just felt like I had to kind of, we talk so much about acting, pretending to be other people. My instinct was I can't do any. I just have to bring as much of myself to the part as I could, and there were so many themes and feelings in the story that I recognized, and so it's my, I feel like it's your responsibility to bring that, because he was so generous, and I always feel like it's like a weird marriage between the two of us and my character.
Paul, one of my favorite lines in the movie now, knowing what happens and seeing it a second time, is really at the beginning when Harry says to Adam, "Do I scare you?" And that's like just like a real, I think, foreshadowing of what's to come.
Do I scare? Wow.
Do I scare you?
Do I
That's what you
scare?
say.
Yeah.
Scare you.
Yeah, I think that's what I never saw that as a foreshadowing. But I think actually you're spot on in the sense that that's a line that serves many purposes upon different viewings. But I think the obligation to the actor in that, the obligation to me in that moment is not to play the end. Because if I'm playing an acute awareness of where I'm going to end up, it's boring and it becomes one thing. But I think in that moment, the "do I scare you" is a provocation. It's like, do I scare you? If not, let me in. If I do, it's also a good thing. It's like there's no wrong answer to Harry at that moment in time. So I think that's just the strength of Andrew's screenplay working its way into your psyche upon second, third viewing.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, in that moment, the playing of it has to be present tense. And that's what it always was for me. Even like, there was no conversation that me and Andrew had about playing a ghost. There's no, because it's not interesting, and two, it's not really playable. And so it was all, I think Harry's superpower is his ability to be present. And that's also one of his greatest downfalls, is that he can't protect himself if he thinks into the future. So yeah.
Andrew, tell me about the fitting for the children's pajamas. Was it custom, or were they just very large children's pajamas?
Well, I sort of was like, didn't want to act. They're mine.
That's a different movie.
Yeah, the children's pajamas. Of course you're going to be like, okay.
Because
Can I wear a dressing gown?
in other scenes, you're wearing your dad's clothes, but
Yes,
in
yes.
this scene, all of a sudden, you're wearing.
Yeah. There's so many things in the film that I don't know, it feels like the film to me is incredibly tactile. It's something I really want. It's maybe not obvious in the film, but I felt like it was a really physical role, actually, oddly. And so that kind of stuff is really
By the
helpful.
way, there's very physical things that happen in this.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But not just the sort of sex scenes that, of course, we were required to do, but actually the tenderness and the affection between the two of them, I always think is, there's certain prejudiced members of the community who can understand to a certain extent sex between people of the same sex. But what I actually think is very radical in the film is the tenderness between the two men, and actually the physicality between the kind of challenge was, it was like, how do you go back to a really childish place without making it sort of, you know, how do you do it in a subtle way, like, as they say, tell the truth but tell it slant, and all that stuff of trying to be lower than your parents, and the way you touch your parents so much, and we have a physicality. And so part of those pajamas actually, and all the incredible production design, where you just love the smell of your father's sweaters, and the smell of your parents' bedroom, and those kind of awful pajamas, polyester pajamas that we used to wear. You know, all that stuff is really important, and it tells the story. I think it's why it's so authentic, and it matches this sort of nuance of Andrew's screenplay, because what's so beautiful about the screenplay, I think, is it tells the story about families in a sense that I think is very common for a lot of us, not just queer people, but the sort of accidental cruelty of families. I don't think, you know, that idea that out of love our parents can say things to us that, particularly possibly for queer people, like, you know, what parent wants to think that about their children, or I didn't come in when you were crying in your room because I thought I would have. This is where my training comes in.
Back of the auditorium.
It's right. But you know, like I don't know what I'm saying. Yeah, the cruelty, like that when the father says, you know, I didn't come into your room because I think I would have been one of the boys who would have bullied you too. And he doesn't mean to say that, like, he doesn't mean to say that to wound or bruise his son, but it's nevertheless so bruising. And I think that's a really common experience for a lot of queer people, that it's not fully embraced acceptance, or it's not all-out rejection, but I think a lot of us have experienced stuff which is a little bit more moderate than that, that you have love within your family, but there's things that sucker punch you, and I think that's a very beautiful denoting of that feeling, and because I think audiences really love nuance.
Well, also, when Harry is talking about being an outsider of his family, and then comes out to them as queer, and they finally put a word to everything they knew.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing when you really sort of act like a child, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, is when you start crying in that scene with your father. The way you put your hands on your face, it's very childlike. So I love that, the subtle ways where, like, sometimes you're childlike, and then other times,
Yeah,
you say to your mother, like, we don't say that anymore.
absolutely,
Like, a
absolutely.
kid wouldn't say it.
I love also the moment when Jamie is about to, it's in this final scene when they're sitting right before you go to the Whitgift Centre, and you just go,
Yeah.
it's
That's
so.
what kids do.
absolutely
They stop you from
so
talking.
brilliant there.
And you know, being in bed with your parents, you know, you want to just be as. I just always want to be smaller than them, and I'm a pretty small person, but mercifully, Jamie, you're pretty small too. And nobody noticeable in your life. Moving swiftly on.
It's true. It's true.
Paul, what kind of discussions did you have with Andrew Haig about being a straight actor playing this queer character?
I just trusted that the fact that he wanted me, and the fact that Andrew was going to be in it was enough for my wanting to be in the film, but we didn't have conversations around it because he believed, it was all through conversations that I had about who I thought Harry was, and he bought what I was saying, and I'm immensely grateful to him for letting me be in this film.
Yeah.
So we gotta talk about the sex scenes. Talk about things like that.
So you got to talk about this.
Does everybody wanna hear about the sex scenes?
Oh, yes,
thank
I
you.
do.
Appreciate
that.
Like you said, they are very tender, they're very authentic. You know, the first kissing scene when Adam forgets to breathe, was that you or was that Adam? It felt so real.
Oh no, that's
That was in the script.
that's in the script.
Wow. So talk about shooting those scenes. Is it something you get them all done right away and get them out of the way, or?
I think there was a good there was a week in there where it was a good solid chunk of
Good
sex.
week.
It was a good week of it. Solid work. No, I think it was, I don't know, because we shot our stuff in about 4 weeks, and most of that was in a studio setup in Wembley in West London. But I think there was 1 week that was particularly sex heavy.
Yeah. You said it. A chunk.
A chunk, yeah.
Because there are a lot of actors here. Yeah, I'm going there. What were you eating off his cast?
It was a mixture of cake. It was cake mixture and water.
Yeah, maybe icing sugar.
Icing sugar and cake mixture. And that was actually, it's true. It was the thing that I was fixated on. I was like, what is that going to be? I actually tested it the night before. I remember props came in and they were like, this is what it is. And I was like, oh, it's delicious. But and it also came at a junction in the filming process where we'd gotten, like, we were giddy and we were like close to that point. I think it was like one of the last things we shot on a Friday, and I was just like, Andrew, we'll just do this a couple of times and we'll laugh about it after, because I felt like if we'd started laughing during it, it would have been game over.
But sex scenes are really weird. Andrew says this. It's really important that everybody is looked after and everybody feels safe. And mercifully, we felt really comfortable. It was amazing. That was really wonderful. We were so comfortable with each other. But actually, sometimes the pressure that's put on sex scenes is sometimes a little bit can be a little bit reductive, because it's really particularly with Andrew. I don't know if many of you have seen Andrew's sex scenes in his movies before, but he's so expert at them. And I think because he wants to keep them as alive as a dialogue scene, because sex is communication. That's what it is. And so whatever chemistry that we have as human beings is one thing, but actually, to try and understand what the chemistry between these two characters would be, and the fact that, Adam wouldn't have been with somebody for a long time. It's all that's so interesting about that, just and what way they touch each other, and that Harry's sort of more front-footed, and that's a really interesting thing to just think about, and rather than just the mechanics of where you're going to be.
We're going to talk about the soundtrack. Sure. Yes. I forget how haunting that music could be.
Power of Love. We were just watching it there at the side. It's what a beautiful song. It's just so, it just gets. And that was in the script. He just had a vision of it. Make love your goal. Lyric.
Were there any scenes that didn't make it into the final cut that you were disappointed?
No. No, I actually don't like. There probably is stuff that's cut, but I don't like none of the centerpiece like duologues were cut.
What was it like playing opposite Jamie and Claire as your parents, who were younger than you in real life, who were supposed to be older than you in the movie, but you're probably older? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, again, it's the sort of audacity of the idea. It's actually a very theatrical idea. I think in the theatre, when somebody comes on and plays multiple characters, we accept it absolutely immediately. But sometimes in the movies, I think we need to sort of CGI, put some weird like nuclear glow around the people so that everything's sort of spoon-fed. And actually, it was so remarkably easy. And I think the most important thing you can have as an actor, two most important things that I think you can have as an actor is an imagination and a sense of humor. And I think if you and just to use your imagination, and they were so adept at playing their parts, it was just so wonderful. And then it required the audience to do a little bit of work, and there's something that audiences love about that. And there was at no point did I ever think this is going to be weird. I just think audacity in that sense in filmmaking is so important, and I just think they're so wonderful. I had two sort of big, quite brutal scenes. Even thinking about them, they make me upset because they're so authentic. One with Claire, that scene where he first sort of comes out to her, and then that extraordinary scene with Jamie. And you don't get to do that a lot, and you certainly you know, I've been saying recently, it feels like a miracle to be able to express that feeling, because I think our job is to, I don't know, the purpose of art, I think, is to sort of make people feel seen and make people's lives better. That's what it's about, and the idea that could make people feel seen in some way, and not just queer people. I think just the tenderness and the vulnerability of both the idea of familial love and the idea of falling in love is I love the fact that those two things are so beautifully intermingled.
This is for both of you, or either one of you. What do you think the movie says about grief? Or is it just sort of it's a poem almost to grief?
I feel like it's clearly a study of it, and it's a meditation, and it's a warning. It's many things to me, but I think the poem's probably the most lyrical way of putting it. I don't really have a full answer on that, because it's like grief is so subjective, you know, like, and I think that's the point of the film. It opens up the subject matter, but it allows you to take away from it what your experience can be. You probably have, that was more your territory for the film.
Yeah, I suppose. And grief, you know, we talk about grief a lot in relation to death, of course. But grief, you know, we have it when a relationship ends or a friendship ends, or like a grief about lost opportunity. And I don't know. I think it's very important to. I don't think it's necessarily morbid to have those themes explored in things, because
It's gotten that sort of morbid, like it's a taboo.
right.
But grief is the most powerful expression of love.
Absolutely, it's the price we pay for love. And I think the idea that life is finite is very present in the film. And isn't it what a wonderful, I just always just think, you know, talking about the film, about how generous and compassionate it is for Andrew to think of the idea and apply it to himself. What would you do? What would you say to somebody? I always think of Adam as he was going through his teenage years, perhaps, and he being bullied still, and moving to a different country, and thinking, oh well, if my parents were around, they'd stand up for me, and if my parents were here, the imagination of grief, and then the fact that he would conjure them up in the way that we do, and imagine what it would be like to talk to them, and the fact that wouldn't necessarily, at the first stages anyway, go easily. They challenge him. I think that's just a wonderful concept.
Well, for me, the scene where it's the morning after you just had sex, and Harry's saying, "Is this you?" and you're telling your parents died, and I know I do this. Adam tried to sort of play it off. Like, that was a long time ago. They died, like, as if it's become normal for Adam, and Harry says, "That doesn't matter."
It doesn't matter.
That
Beautiful.
line is absolutely gorgeous.
Well, we always look to the light, don't we? That's the way human beings, that for me, that was a bit, you know, in a film about grief, so much of us, I think, don't want to wallow in sadness. They're difficult waters to swim in, and I think what's really extraordinary about human beings is that we make a joke, and we go, well, you know, we're diagnosed with something, and we say, well, we've got it early. I find that the sort of courageousness of human beings so moving, and that's why trying to find moments of lightness is really important, because it's the way human beings are.
I also think that they're both incredibly brave with each other in conversations. Like, they make choices to go further into the darker elements of those conversations. Like, when you're having a conversation with somebody who doesn't love you as much as Adam and Harry do, you let them off the hook. But when Adam says it was a long time ago, instead of going, oh, Harry goes, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Or when Harry's lying on the bed and he's talking about being pushed to the edges of his family, someone who loves Harry less will just avoid that territory.
Yes.
Instead he goes, why is that?
Yeah, why is it? Yeah.
And it sounds like such a simple thing, but I think it's such a brave thing in life to fully commit to loving somebody and including the kind of difficult conversations, the thorny parts of their personalities and their baggage and their sadness. And you actually said something to me in life the only thing that you're left with, the only thing that you're left with after grief is, the only thing you're left with after love is grief, and I think that the film is an example of that as well.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much.